Hello, this is Michael from West Michigan Pasta and Provisions, and today we're going to make a homemade macaroni and cheese. So we're going to talk about doing it real simply. We're going to make a homemade style macaroni and cheese. It's very easy. It's something anybody can do at home. Quite a few ways to do it. So the first thing we want to do is start with our cheese sauce. We're going to use some of our West Michigan pasta and provisions. We're just going to use a canastrini, so like an elbow, kind of a dressed up elbow style. I've got water on for that. You can be pre-cooked and held either cold in advance, or you can come right from the water into your cheese sauce. So as far as making the cheese sauce, basically we're working in what's classically called a bechamel. So a bechamel is a thickened dairy or thickened milk sauce, and then you add cheese to it. So there's a lot of different sauces that can begin with this same process. Classically, it's done with butter and flour. I'm going to take about half a stick of butter. I'm going to just melt that, medium heat. Don't want the butter to brown, I just simply want it to melt. And then we're going to sprinkle in flour. It's about equal amounts of flour, so in this case I'm going to use about 2 ounces by volume, equal in volume, not by weight. So I'm going to add in that. And so it's about 1 to 1. And you don't have to be very particular with this. When you're doing other types of roux and butter and flour thickened sauces, sometimes you have to be a little more careful. But because we're going to do what's called a pale or a blonde roux, it has no color. We're just simply going to use the butter to cover the flour so it doesn't cause lumps. So you're lubricating the flour or the starch and preventing lumps from if you just sprinkled in the, if you'd simply just sprinkled in the flour to your milk. Cook it so it just begins to get a little bubbly, everything's melty, and you don't have to go much further than that. Ideally, you'd like to have a hot liquid to add to it, but milk a lot of times is coming cold out of the fridge. So if you do add in a cold liquid, that's okay. You don't preheat the milk. What you do need to do is make sure you stir the bottom so that that flour and roux does not stick to the bottom until it warms up enough that working itself into simmering in the sauce. The roux needs about 15-20 minutes at a minimum to cook out. Cook in the sauce for the flour to expand, to thicken at a nice simmer or a light boil, and the flour flavor will disappear. If you serve it too fast, it won't fully thicken or it will taste floury. So here we go. It's not burning or changing color, but it is nice and bubbly, and it's loose. It should be like a light sand. We're going to add in a couple cups of milk. We may adjust it a little bit. You don't need much roux to thicken a sauce, and when you make a cheese sauce, the cheese does a lot of thickening, so we want to be conscientious that it's a very light sauce, or by the time then you add the pasta will also continue to thicken because of the starch in the pasta, and you're going to end up with way too thick a macaroni and cheese. So I got 2 cups of milk right now. I may add a little bit more. That's a pretty good ratio, so about half a stick of butter. All right, so this roux is starting to come to a simmer, the boil. It's starting to lightly thicken. I'm going to turn my heat down. It's real easy to burn the bechamel sauce because of the dairy in it and everything as it thickens, so we want to watch a moderate heat. Just keep it at a simmer. So this is starting to get bubbly, a little bit thick. I'm going to add another cup of milk. I got a block of Velveeta cheese, or cheese, pasteurized cheese spread food, and the reason I have that, about the only thing I use it for, is macaroni and cheese, and it's part of the secret to making good macaroni and cheese. So Velveeta isn't just, made up flavors and stuff. It is really cheese. They've taken a number of different cheese cultures and products, and they've brought them together to get the flavor, but then they emulsify them together or blend them so that they're very smooth, which is sort of the key of why I want to use it. I like it because it creates a really creamy, salty, cheesy, buttery, nice balanced base that is the preferred American palate. So you can simply cut up chunks of the Velveeta, which by the way does not need to be refrigerated until it's opened. And so I will use that cut up into chunks, and it will melt really nicely. So that's going to create this really great base, and then to that you could add other cheeses that maybe give it more distinction. A nicer sharp cheddar, a blend of cheeses. You could add in some jack cheese or smoked cheese, jalapeno, whatever you're thinking about, blue cheese. It's pretty good from there, but it will give you the base, and not only will it give you this base flavor that's generally very desirable, it gives you the texture. Many cheeses have issues in that the harder they get, they're very high in protein, but that protein is very tightly compacted, and it's hard to get it to melt. So that's the issue with things like Parmesan and sharp cheddar, hard cheddars, is if you just throw them in your milk, you may find that they get too stringy, but beyond that, they may have granules and get kind of chunky, or because they're so reduced of water from their aging and production process, they could end up that they're going to squeeze out oil, and you're going to get oil breaking out of the sauce, and you're going to still have these little chunks of the protein that isn't very tasty. So you can get around that by using a moderately higher fat sauce. I did use a whole milk, but you can use the half and half. And then if you add in the Velveeta, you've got a base that will better dissolve these other cheeses and give you a better chance of holding it all together. Other things you can think about when making these cheese sauces, I know people that put cream cheese in. Cream cheese is really low fat. The problem with that is being very low fat is it can kind of get gray and chalky looking if you don't have enough cream in it. I've seen people use tub cheese and like bar cheese spreads. They're similar, but I find that sometimes they get a little gritty. It's a little different formulation. I'm not a fan of some of those other options. This is really my go-to. And it doesn't have to be branded Velveeta, but the equivalent non-brands are probably okay. So I'm just going to add in Velveeta, and as this sauce kind of cooks, it will begin to dissolve and melt, and may add a little bit more. I'll see what other cheeses I have laying around. So if you make this thicker, it becomes a dipping sauce. You add some jalapenos and all the rest of that stuff, and you can turn it into a nacho sauce. So for kids, I just do it straight like this. I don't add anything else. For adults, I like to put a little white pepper in, maybe a touch of black pepper. If you want to do it as a baked style, once it's done, you can put it in the oven with crumb on top. Of course, you can add in anything from ham to lobster and vegetables, peas, whatever you can imagine can go in there to dress it up and really get it fancy. But this base will always work. Around a pound of pasta, something like that. 1 package, 1 pound of pasta. I like to use a spoon that's a wooden spoon, or a spoon that's got a flat bottom, because the whisk doesn't always scrape the sides on the bottom. What you'll do is you get little burn flecks coming off the bottom. Best thing you can do is just change pans. If it gets really burned up, you'll taste that burn flavor in the cheese sauce, and then there's nothing you can do but throw it away. All right, so looking in our fridge, I got a little bit of heavy cream that's just been laying around. I don't think it's going to get used from a project. A couple ounces. So I'll just throw that in there. Makes it a little richer. I've got some cheese that's the end of a package, and enhancing up a little Swiss in there. So we'll put a couple pieces of Swiss in there. Got a couple pieces of Jack, pieces of deli cheddar. I recommend cutting things up to 1/2 inch or 1 inch cubes. If you're using blocks of cheese, it just helps them melt better. They can really take a long time to melt. So I think I'm going to add another 1/2 cup of milk, 3/4 cup of milk. Add that cream in there. So that's going to bring me up to the full quart of dairy. And I think this is going to get me to a thinner point. Now, even if it looks really thin when the pasta goes in, 2 things happen. The pasta is going to start absorbing a little bit of cheese sauce, and the starch from the pasta is going to thicken it a little bit. And as it goes from near a boil where it's really hot and starts to cool, the whole sauce is going to thicken a little bit from cooling. So it should actually come off your stove still very thin. So this is starting to get a little stringy, and that's because of the other cheeses I added in, the Swiss and such. So we're going to have a really nice, nobody's going to complain about this macaroni, let's put it that way. We want the pasta to be a little more cooked than a traditional Italian pasta. We want it fully cooked, not falling apart, but we can take that little al dente chew out by cooking an extra 1 to 2 minutes. That's going to put this pasta at probably about 12 minutes. Yeah. We're poaching it al dente, but yeah, so we got another 2-3 minutes on that pasta, which is good because the sauce is still just dissolving the final chunks. I used a big enough pot that I should be able to just stir everything together. Alright, I got a little water in there, that's okay, because like I said, this is on the thicker side. So. Alright, we're full to the top. Yeah, so I love putting ham in here. Very popular right now is lobster or crab meat, dressing it up. You can put in peas or broccoli or other things to make it a little lighter and maybe a little more health driven with your balance with your vegetables. As this sets a little bit, it's going to set up, so I'm not worried about having extra cheese sauce right now. I'd be worried about if it's thin, and if it looks like the perfect amount, that probably if it has to sit around for service or you know, buffet or is going to get baked off, it's going to seem a little dry. And I'm not going to garnish it, I'm not going to do anything to it. It's very kid friendly, minus maybe that little pinch of pepper but I don't think they're even going to notice that. So that's a perfect Midwest, all-American macaroni and cheese. It is creamy, it's rich, it's buttery, it's got some saltiness. It's not going to set up and get gritty or greasy no matter what you do to it. So this is Chef Michael, and we're making the mysteriously difficult to make all-American macaroni and cheese.